In this video, we look at unit scale and setting up grid and snapping. Let's get started. To begin, we can come to File and New. Down below, we can close the previous file. Then come to File and Save. Navigate to a location to save the file. This can be renamed Building Plans. Now click Save. We are almost ready to start drafting, but there are a few more settings I need to cover first. We can come up to Edit and down here to Preferences. We begin in the General tab. Here in General, set your preferred language. Next, set the number of recent files available to choose from. The Style Sheet options let you change the default color scheme of FreeCAD. Select one from the list here. To update the changes, we can click OK. Then the changes will be applied to the viewport. Let's come back to Edit and open Backup Preferences. Find one you like here, but for this course, I can leave it at the default and switch this back to No Style Sheet. I'll click OK just to update that and come back into Preferences. Next, you can change the size of the toolbar icons. I can increase this to 32px. This should make it easier to catch what I've clicked on screen. Next, you can specify what workbench to open after startup. FreeCAD opens to the Start workbench by default, but if there was a workbench you regularly work in, then changing this will have FreeCAD open into that workbench. I can set this to Last. The other tabs across the top are packed with settings to help you customize FreeCAD even further. Next, let's come over to the Units tab. Here we can set the unit system to use. There are options for building Euro or building US. We can leave this set to default standard. We can increase the number of decimals to 4. We can skip the next few tabs. Import-Export we'll be looking at later when setting up the ODA converter. This is very important to the functionality of FreeCAD. Let's come down and open the Draft tab. Up top, switch into Grid and Snapping. Because we will be drafting a large object, we need to increase the grid spacing to something that better matches that scale. Here we can increase this to 1000 mm or 1 meter. With those changes, we can click Apply and OK. Sometimes you need to click on and off the grid to have that update and reflect the changes we made in Preferences. In this video, we take a look at drawing lines using coordinates and look at changing an object's properties. Let's get started. Now we can move on and start creating the ground floor layout. I can drag in this PDF file. This image is available in a resource as a PDF called GF Dimensions. Use this for dimension and layout reference. I'll be calling out dimensions as we draft the plan, so having this should aid you in that process. It's not essential you have it open, but it may help. To begin, we can make sure the working plane is set to auto. After changing the icon size, I needed to rearrange the toolbars here so everything was visible. Let's come into a top view. We're going to start with construction lines. These will be used for distance and positions. The construction folder can be hidden at the end of the process. So let's click and enable construction mode first. Now, any new object created will get added into the construction folder. That folder gets created as soon as we create something. We can select the line tool first. This opens the properties box. The line will be 3.2 meters long. We can start this at world origin, so in the X field, let's input 0. Notice if you move the cursor into the viewport, the global X field changes and updates to your cursor position. So be careful when entering coordinates as it's easy to accidentally change these values. If you keep the cursor over the line properties, the values don't change. This time, let's keep the cursor over the properties and input 0 for the X and press enter. That opens the Y field, so input 0 for the Y coordinates. Press return and input 0 for the Z coordinate. Press return one more time to confirm these 3 coordinates. The properties box updates and expects the second coordinates of the line. If we drag away for a moment without clicking, the first point is at 0, 0, 0. So let's input the second coordinate points. Hover back over the properties. In the X, let's input 3200 and make sure there is an mm to specify millimeters and not meters. Then press return. Then we can input 0 in the Y and Z. At this stage, we could press return and complete the operation. Alternatively, in this scene, we can press X and that will specify the other two axes will be 0. Input 3200 mm for the length, making sure to remove any m suffix and then press enter. The construction group has been created and the line added inside. Select the line and below in the data tab we can make sure the length is indeed 3200 mm. This length value can be modified as it's a parametric object. Let's increase the line length to 5000. Then click away to update the viewport and the line length increases along the x-axis. If we expand the placement settings, we can update the angle to 90 and rotate this to align with the y-axis. Next, inside placement, let's expand the position tab. In the position X axis field, input 1000 and move this forward along the x-axis. As we are seeing, you can use the object's data to modify an object's property after creation. In the View tab, there are properties associated with an object's visibility, color, width, or whether it's selectable or not. Let's use this line to get the second point of a rectangle. So open back up the Data Properties tab. Come back to the Placement tab and we can input 16,000 mm into the X location. You can specify the unit of metric in FreeCAD if necessary. So input an mm for millimeters or m for meters. So this would be 16 meters or 16,000 millimeters. Finally, in the length field, we can input 1000 mm. Now we have an endpoint here to snap onto. So from the toolbar, select the rectangle tool. This tool is similar to the line tool as you first input the start point, then the second point. For the first, we can input 0 for the X. Press return and input 0 for the Y. Press return and input 0 for the Z. Now for the second point, we can come over and hover the cursor near the endpoint. Make sure endpoint snapping is enabled on the toolbar here. When the small circle appears, you can click and snap to the endpoint. In this video, we take a look at changing line placement properties, the Draft Trimx tool, and the Move and Copy tool. Let's get started. Let's begin with the rectangle object. The size of this object represents the overall length and width of the building. We can use the Offset tool and form the wall thickness. So from the Modification toolbar, select the Offset tool. As we draw towards the rectangle, we get a preview of the offset. In the properties, we can check on copy. That way, the original rectangle remains in position and the new section is offset. In the distance field, we can input -300. We use minus to get this offset inside the rectangle. Now press return to complete the operation and create this offset. Next, we can start marking in the internal walls of the building. We can use this first line we created and reposition that. From the drawing, we can see the distance will be 4650 from the origin. So select the line and open the Data tab. Expand the Placement tab and the Position tab. In the X field, we can input 4650 mm to specify the unit. In the Y field, we can input 300 and move this up into position. Then let's come to the length field. Here we could reduce the length by 600 and make this the exact inside length. However, let's use the Draft Trimx tool and reduce the length that way. So from the Modification toolbar, we can select the Trim tool. Now come over and hover on the edge we want to trim back to. This edge highlights, and we can click anywhere along to specify the length. The line now gets trimmed back. If we select the line again, in the Data tab, the Length field has been updated to the new line length. Next, we can offset this line to the width of the internal wall of 150. So with the line selected, select the Offset tool. Make sure the copy flag is true. Now drag out, then input 150 and press return to confirm. Now we need the next two internal walls. These are at a distance from this point of 4900. Press Ctrl and select both these lines in the tree view. We can come up and choose the Move tool. In the Move properties, we can check on the Copy option, as we also want to duplicate both these lines. The next thing we need is a base point, so hover on the endpoint of the first line until the snap point highlights and select this. Then drag away, and if you follow along the x-axis at the same level as the point, notice how the x-axis locks. Now you can also press X to lock the x-axis. Input 4900 and press return to confirm. Next, we need another copy of these two lines over a distance of 2500. So we can select the Move tool again. Check on Copy so these get duplicated. Hover on the endpoint of the first line and select the base point as reference. Press X to lock in that axis. Input 2550 and enter. In this video, we take a look at using the Wire tool and construction mode. Let's get started. We can start with this line and use it to form the internal horizontal walls. So first, select the Move tool. In the properties, check on Copy. Notice here that the shortcut key is listed for each of the additional settings. Next, we can select the base point, drag away and press X to lock in this axis. Input 1000 and press Enter to place this here for a moment. If we come to the Data tab, we can expand the placement settings. Here we can input 0 for the rotation. Then for the Y location, we can input 6500. We can make this long enough to include two walls. So first, in the X position, we can input 6300. The length can then be increased, so input 10,900 here. Now we can select the Offset tool. Make sure Copy is checked on. Drag away and input 150 and enter. Next, we need two more lines a distance of 1200 down along the Y-axis. Select both these lines by pressing Ctrl and adding to the selection. Select the Move tool and in the properties check on Copy. Select the base point first. Now if we drag away, press Y to lock in the axis. This will be a negative value, so input -1350 and enter. That's all the construction lines for the walls, so now we can start drawing in the actual building lines. Select these lines and drag them inside the construction folder. These were added outside as construction mode was switched off. Let's create a new layer. In the tree view, expand the Layers tab. Double-click and rename this Walls. If we click Auto Group, the selected layer will become active. Now any object created in the scene will get added to the wall collection. We can use this Draft Wire tool and start tracing over the construction lines. Let's zoom into the first vertical line here. We can start at the top point, so click here, then drag down. Now this wall extrudes down 100 mm past this point of the wall here. Press Y to lock in the axis. Then hover on the endpoint to get the first distance and left click. Now we need to draw down 100 along the negative Y, so input -100 and enter. Next, we need to change the axis, so press X and drag across. While in the tool, we can press S to activate the snap menu. Here, switch on perpendicular. Now snap across. Next, we need to change the axis back, so press Y and drag up and snap to the top here. We can press Escape to exit the tool. Next, we can copy this wire object along here. Select the Move tool. Then check on Copy over here. Now get a base point to reference. Drag across and press X to lock the axis. Now select the first edge here to snap onto. If we select the construction folder, we can press the spacebar to hide the objects inside and check we have what we expected. That looks good, so press the spacebar again to unhide. We can now create the bottom sections to match the top. So select the wire tool again. Select the second point on the bottom to get the base point. Now drag up and press Y to lock in the axis. We can hover on this endpoint and get the distance. Drag up and input 100 and enter. Press X to change direction and snap this across. Now press Y and snap this back down here. Press Escape to exit. Next, we can make a copy, so select the Move tool. Check on Copy and get the base point. Drag across and press X to lock in the axis. Now snap into position. Next, we can select the Line tool. Draw the two lines from the top to the bottom and finish off the walls here. When you are done, hide the construction folder and check everything is correct. That looks good. To finish this, we can mark in the external walls. Select the Line tool again. Click on the endpoint and start tracing around this outer one. Press LI to activate the Line tool and continue working around. Snap to each endpoint around the perimeter. Click back to the start to finish. We can select the Line tool again and this time trace around the inner line. We can avoid crossing the internal walls so that the walls will look connected as they should in a drawing. So click up to and start the next line after these. Repeat this all the way around and mark in these lines. On the right side, we can actually cross this upper line as the internal wall won't connect here. Finish this by drawing back at the start. In the tree view, we can hide the construction folder and check everything looks correct. That looks good. We can add in the vertical lines in the next video. In this video, we continue drafting the internal walls. Let's get started. Let's begin and start adding the horizontal lines. We can start with the Line tool. Then on the right side, get the endpoint here and draw a line across. Press X to lock the axis, then hover down here to get the distance and snap. Repeat that for the second line underneath and draw this across here. We can then select the vertical line and press Delete to remove it. Next, select the Line tool and draw two new lines, one on top and connect there, then a second to connect below. Now we can use the Line tool and there is an endpoint here. We can start the line. Press X and lock this, then hover and snap to get the length. We can repeat that for the line below on the opposite side of the hallway. Next, both these need to be offset by 150. Select the top line. Now the Offset tool. We can drag up from the line. Input 150 and press Enter. Repeat that for the lower line. Select the Offset tool. Then drag away and input 150 to offset. We created these sections using the Wire tool, and the easiest way will be to draw lines over these objects, then delete them. So select the Line tool and start tracing over this shape. All the way around. Just skip crossing the joining wall. Finish this. We can then find the wire objects in the Walls folder. Press Delete and remove it. We should be left with the lines formed like this. The same can be repeated for the remaining walls. Try get that done before the next video and we can move on to marking in the windows. In this video, we take a look at midpoint snapping and rotating objects. Let's get started. Let's click on Auto Group here and create a new layer. In the tree view, double click and rename this layer to Windows. With this layer selected, we can click Auto Group again and the selected layer will become active. We can start on the bottom right side and mark the position of the first window. Let's actually switch on construction mode first. Now select the line tool. This first line will be 1575 up from this corner. Hover here and in the x-axis on the line properties 16 is displayed. We can press return to accept this. Be careful not to move the cursor or the values will change. After you press return, the Y field is active, so we can input 1575 mm. Make sure to use mm and not m after this value. It can sometimes switch to meters, so you need to be careful. Press return again and then in the Z we can input 0 and press return again. If we move the cursor now, the first point of the line is in position. Drag across and snap to the inside line on the bottom here and finish this line. Next we can select this line. Then up top, select the offset tool. Drag up and get the line preview. We can input 2000 here. We are finished with construction mode right now, so we can switch this off. Notice how the construction folder is hidden, but the two construction lines are visible. We just need to select the folder and press the spacebar to unhide and hide again, but we can wait until we draw in the rectangle first. Select this tool. Now hover the cursor and get the first point and add this here. Drag up and snap to the second point and draw the rectangle shape. We can select the construction folder now and press the spacebar 2 times to hide these two construction lines. On the snap menu, we can enable midpoint snap. Now select the line tool. We can draw a line from the midpoint to the midpoint and finish marking in this window. Next, we want to copy both these objects, so select these in the tree view. Now select the move tool. In the properties, check on copy. We can hover and get the snap midpoint here. Drag up and snap this to the same midpoint up top. Now we can select the outside and the two inside lines this side and delete them. We can draw in lines that only connect to the windows and don't overlap. Select the line tool and draw lines from endpoint to endpoint. This will make modeling in Blender easier. The shortcut LI works well here and saves time with back and forth to the toolbar. There is another window the same dimension on the top right here. So we can make a duplicate of one window, rotate and snap into position. So expand the window folder. Select one rectangle and one line and make sure both are already a unit. Then we can select the move tool. Check on copy. Select the base point and drag this away. Press Shift+B and drag a selection to select these again. This time we can select the rotate tool. For the first point we can select the bottom corner. This next point is the base angle, so we can drag straight up and snap to the opposite corner. Now for the rotation, press Shift and snap this to 90 and left click, or input 90 and press return. Now select the move tool again. You can use the midpoint snap. Now snap this to the center of the wall. In this video, we take a look at changing the length properties of an object and we use the draft wire to mark the large window. Let's get started. The next window will be center of this wall here and 3000 in length. Let's shift select the last two objects we copied. Now select the move tool. Check on copy here. Select the base point, then move this away here first. Now if we select the rectangle in the tree view, down below in the height field as this was rotated, we can input 3000. We can repeat that for the line and increase the length here to 3000. Now select both objects again. Select the move tool. Select the midpoint as the base and snap this into position. There is also a window 3000 in length below here. So select both these objects again and make another copy. Select the midpoint and press Y to lock in this axis. That way we can snap down to the correct level. On the left side of the building, there is a large window running around into 3700 from the end. We can draw this in now. Let's switch back on construction mode. Select the line tool and we can hover below here. In the X field, we can input 3700 and press enter. That's the first point, so drag up and press Y to lock the axis. Now snap up to the height. We can select this line now. Then select the Move tool. Make sure and check on Copy. Select the base point and drag up. Press Y, then snap this into position. Select the Line tool again and we can draw two diagonal lines across the corners. Draw these bottom and top. Let's switch off construction mode. Select the Wire tool and start tracing the window shape around here. Always best zoom in close on short lines to make sure it is actually snapping to the correct point. Trace this all around and snap back to the first point to complete the closed wire. Finally, we can select the Line tool again. Now snap to the end point of the lines and just define this as a window. With that complete, we can select the construction folder and press the spacebar twice and switch the lines off. The final step is to select any lines that are overlapping. So that's these two up top and the two down below here. Control select these. Now press delete and remove them. If any construction lines are outside like here, make sure they are inside the construction folder. Then unhide and hide again. Now select the Line tool and work around and draw these wall lines back to connect up. I can quickly work around and connect these up. These were added to the window layer, so I can select these first. Now add them into the wall layer and tidy this up. In this video, we take a look at where to get the ODA file converter and how to link the application inside FreeCAD. Let's get started. Before we move on to importing furniture objects, it can be convenient to use CAD blocks from other sources. These are common drawing elements such as tables, chairs, or drawing symbols. Rather than drafting these yourself, they can be found online and added to your project. CAD blocks are commonly available in DWG or DXF format. To import these files into FreeCAD, an external application needs to be linked to convert the file. This application is called the ODA file converter. In a web browser, I have typed in DWG FreeCAD. Here we can click into the freecad.org wiki page. This explains about DWG file use within FreeCAD, including what you need to be able to import DWG files. The converter information is here and called the ODA converter. We can right click here and open a new tab. Now open this page. This is a standalone application that's available for Windows, Mac and Linux. It's straightforward to download and install. I have this installed on my system. So have a read about the application, then download and install it. When you have that downloaded and installed, we can open back up our FreeCAD project where we can link the ODA converter. We can come up to Edit and open the Preferences tab. In the Import Export section here, we can open the DWG tab. This is where we can link a path to that ODA file converter we have installed on our system. So make sure you have installed the application on your computer so it can be linked here. So once you have it installed, we can click this File Path button. Then navigate to where it was installed on your system. In my case, this is Windows, so it's in my program files. It's here in a folder called ODA File Converter. Here we can link the .exe file, so select it. This is the ODA executable, and when it's selected we can click open. This now makes the application available to FreeCAD. This will work in the background when working with DWG files in FreeCAD. We can also open the DXF tab. Here we can put a check mark in Allow FreeCAD to automatically download and update the DXF libraries. When we are done, we can click OK. So now if you were to use CAD blocks, just come to File and Import. Then navigate to the CAD blocks and import. The ODA converter will work in the background. The ODA converter is a standalone application, so you can use this outside of FreeCAD to convert files. In the next video, we can import some furniture assets for our drawing, but feel free to add in CAD blocks yourself. In this video, we make modifications to the door object and create the internal doors. We use the mirror tool during this process. Let's get started. Let's select the three objects that make up the lower door. Select the Move tool. Now check on Copy. Choose a base point and move this away into some space. The internal doors will be narrower, so we can make the necessary adjustments and reduce this object to fit. In the tree view, select the rectangle object first. In the Data tab, the height can be reduced to 150. Then the length can be reduced to 1000. Update those changes by clicking into the scene. Next, we can select the line. Change the length to 1000 also. Click away and update this change. Finally, we can select the arc object. Here in the radius field, we can input 1000 and update this. The rectangle needs to be repositioned, so select it. Now the Move tool. Select the corner point and snap this back into position. Select all three objects in the 3 view. Press MV for the Move tool. Select the corner base point. Now snap this to the inner point of the wall up here. This will be 150 from the wall along the x-axis. This will be a negative value, so select these again and press M and V. Select the base point. Press X to lock in that axis and input -150 and enter. Next, we need a door on the opposite wall. This time, we can use the Mirror tool. We will need a center point to use when mirroring, so select the Line tool. Now draw a line between the 2 points of this wall here. Select the 3 objects of the door in the tree view. We can come up and select the Mirror tool. First, select the center point of the new line. Drag away and press X to lock in this axis, then click again. That has created 3 mirrored objects in the tree view. One feature to note is that if we select this original line here, then in the Data tab we can modify the length. So we can input 2000. The mirrored line will also update as this is linked to the original. We can select this line again and input 1000 back here. We need 3 more smaller internal doors marked in here. So select the 3 mirrored objects. Select the Move tool and check on Copy. Select the base point and just leave this to the side. Repeat that again and make another copy. And now make another copy and place this over here. We can start with the bottom door. Press Shift+B and drag a selection. Press R and O for the Rotate tool. Select the first point and now the second on the same plane. Input the rotation value, or you can press Shift and this snaps to increments. This looks to be about 270, so left click to confirm. We can quickly rotate the remaining 2 into the correct orientation using the same method. These will both be 90 degrees, so get these rotated. Finally, the top and bottom door need to be moved 150 away from the wall. We can start with the bottom one. Select the three objects. Press MV for the move tool. Select the base point first. Drag up and press Y. Input 150 and enter. We can repeat that process for the top door. Select the three parts of this door. Press MV. Then this will be moved in the negative Y direction, so for the distance input -150 and enter. For the final door, select it. This time move it up along the Y axis by 1850. Now there are two things left to complete. The first is one final door on this wall here. This is an external door from the garage. It's the same size as the external doors, except the rectangle needs to be 150 to match the width of the wall. It's also 650 from this wall here. Your challenge is to make a duplicate of the external door, modify and fit this into the wall. The second task is to remove any overlapping lines over the doors and draw in connecting lines. We can also remove this temporary line here. I can complete this before the next video, so try get that completed. In this video, we take a look at changing the line draw style and changing the line thickness of multiple objects. Let's get started. Hopefully you have gotten the doorway duplicated, modified and into position. The final door we need to mark in is the garage door. Then we can modify the style of both the doors and windows. Let's start with the line tool. For the first point, click the upper line as this sits center of the garage walls. Press Y and snap down the distance. Select the line now and we can use the offset tool. Drag to one side and input 1500 and press enter. Select the center line again. Activate the tool again by pressing O and S. Drag and input 1500 and enter. Careful not to adjust the line position as the value is overwritten. We can delete the center line. Now we can also delete the overlapping lines and draw back in the new lines to connect up. I can quickly draw these in here. Now we can look at changing the line style of the windows and doors to differentiate them and have them stand out a little more. Let's start with the window lines. We can select both the inside and outside lines. Press Ctrl and add to the selection. You want to make sure there are no overlapping lines as this style will only be applied to the windows and not the walls. With all these window lines selected, let's open the View tab. Here we are looking for the line width property. Change this to 1 and reduce the thickness of the line. Click away to update the selection. We can do the same thing with the inside and outside door lines. Select each of these. Careful when selecting as a double click can sometimes deselect everything. With these selected, we can input 1 in the line width field. Click away and update those changes. Finally, let's select all the door arcs. Quickly add these to the selection. In this case, let's change the draw style. So from the drop down, we can choose dashed, but feel free to pick the style you want. Very useful being able to change all objects selected and not just individually selected objects. In this video, we take a look at arraying an object. Let's get started. we can begin and select the rectangle tool. We can click anywhere for the first point. For the length along the x-axis, we can input 1000. Press enter and input 350 for the y-axis. The z will be 0, so press enter and finish this. With it selected, we can select the move tool. Select the base point. Now move this to the inside corner of the wall here. The stairs will start 1420 away from this wall. So select the move tool again. Select the base point and drag away. Press Y to lock in this axis. This is moving in the negative Y direction, so input minus 1420 and enter. Rather than duplicating this object multiple times, we can use the array tool. With the rectangle selected, we can select the array tool here. That opens the array properties. We will be arraying this along the y-axis. So in the Y field, for the number of elements, we can input 13. In the X intervals, input 0 for the X, Y, Z fields here. Then in the Y intervals, this will be the same width as the steps themselves. So input minus 350 in the Y field. Because we want to array along the negative Y direction, make sure and add that minus symbol. That's it, so we can click OK to complete. In the tree view, an array folder has been created and inside is the original rectangle object set to hidden. In this video, we take a look at using the arc tool and rotating objects. Let's get started. Before we move on and start creating the doors, there is a wire object in the Windows layer. Delete any and draw in lines to replace them. I can quickly draw these back in here. We can start with the front door of the building. Rather than draw this in place, let's draw it independently first, then move it into position. First, we can create a new layer. Then let's rename this Doors. With it selected, click Auto Group and make this the active layer. Now we can select the rectangle tool. Click anywhere for the first point. For the dimensions, we can input 1200 for the X and press return. Input 300 for the Y and press return, and input 0 for the Z and press return. Select the line tool now. Snap to the endpoint first. This will represent the door open. Drag up and press Y. Input 1200 and press enter. Next, we can come up and select the arc tool. We first need to define the center of this arc, so click and select the endpoint. The next input is the radius. We can input 600 or come to this endpoint and select this. Next, the start angle, so we can click the same point as this will be the start. Now come down around and select the aperture angle or this second endpoint. In the tree view, select the three objects that make up this door. Select the move tool and get the base point. Now snap this up into position. We can then select any overlapping lines and delete these. Then use the line tool and draw lines to connect back up. The back doorway is the same size, so select the door objects. Then select the Move tool. Check on Copy over here first. Select the base point and then snap this up. These will need to be rotated 180. Let's select the Line tool and draw a line midpoint to midpoint on the doorway. This will help us rotate 180 degrees. So select them again. Now select the Rotation tool. Select the center point. Drag to the end and pick this second point. Input 180 and enter. We can now select the center line. Press delete and delete the temporary line. To finish this, select the overlapping lines. Now draw back in lines connecting this up. In this video, we take a look at adding in DXF files and storing these inside groups. Let's get started. In the resource folder of the course, there is an asset folder. If you haven't downloaded that folder yet, now is the time, as we are ready to import the furniture elements. It's a compressed file, so make sure and unzip the folder. First, we can create a new layer. Now double-click and rename this furniture. We can make this active, but when importing objects, they get added outside layers. Imports also get imported in a great number of shapes, so we can try organize these by using groups. The benefit of groups is they can be stored inside layers, whereas layers cannot. So if we right-click on the drawing name, and from here, create a group. Double-click and rename this bat. Then drag and drop this inside the furniture layer. This will help keep the tree view clean and easy to manage the furniture elements. Now we can come to File and down to Import. Navigate to where you have downloaded and unzip the asset folder. Find the furniture folder and inside we can select the bat file. Then click Open and add it into the drawing. When this gets added, it does as a collection of shapes. We can select the first, come down to the last one and press Shift and select this. Then on the modification menu, we can choose Upgrade. This will upgrade these shapes to more complex objects and reduces the number. This converts the shapes to wire. So now we can select all of these, then drag and drop these into the bat folder. We can zoom in and see the bat has been added into position. That will be the process and something you can manage between videos. But let's do one more before moving on. So let's create a new group. Double click and rename this car and press enter. Then drag and drop this into the furniture layer, because a car is really just a piece of furniture. Now come to File and Import. We can select the car now and add this in here. Select all the shape objects. Now upgrade the parts. These can be moved into the car folder. That will be the process of adding in the remaining assets. I can continue this between videos, so try get this task completed before the next video. In this video, we take a look at adding dimensions to the drawing and how to configure the dimension settings. Let's get started. Let's continue and add dimensions to our drawing. There are different methods when adding dimensions within FreeCAD, and I find this method pretty straightforward for 2D layouts. To begin, in the tree view, we can create a new layer. These can be renamed dimensions. So now we can come over and select the dimension tool and make it active. Make sure the endpoint snap is active. It can sometimes be helpful switch off some of the other snap options and just leave on endpoint. The first dimension we want is the distance of the return window here. So on the very corner, snap to an endpoint. Then up to the wall here. When placing these dimensions, they should be placed a set distance from the line. This first one will be 500 from the line, so we can press Y to lock in that axis. Then input 500 and enter. That places the dimension here, but before we can see it, we will need to make some modifications to its properties. Select this and we can open the View tab. The first setting is the arrow type. Choose one from the list, but I can change this to arrow. Then above in the arrow size, increase this to something like 50. This can be adjusted at any time. Let's move down a little and look for the font size. Here we can increase this to 300. The next setting we can adjust is the extension line. Input 300 here and have the extension line indicate the start and end of this dimension. We can also input 300 in the extension overshoot and have the line display both sides of the dimension line. Next, we can come down to the unit area. Here you can choose to show the unit suffix. Here this is displayed as millimeter. We can set this to false and switch this off. In the decimals drop down, we can reduce the precision to 0 and remove anything past the decimal point. We can also move the text up off the dimension line, so this is easier read. That is controlled here in the text spacing field. Here we can input 100 and add the suffix mm to specify millimeters. They are some of the more common dimension settings to change. If you added multiple dimensions, it's possible to select them all and change the settings at once. Another option is to set the dimension settings in preferences first. That way you may only need to change individual settings. Let's take a look, so come to Edit and open Preferences. Here we can open the Draft tab. Now open Texts and Dimensions. We can start with the font size. Increase this to 300. This will use millimeter by default. We can leave the display mode to text above. The 3D option works well for 3D models. We can reduce the decimals to 0 and match the existing dimensions. For the extension line size, increase this to 300. Then for the extension line overshoot, we can increase this to 300. For the arrow style, this can be changed to arrow. Then increase the size to 50. For the text spacing, increase this to 100. Finally, uncheck Show Unit Suffix. We can click OK to save these changes. Now we can select the dimension tool again and get the length of this wall section here. Press Y to lock in that axis. Input 500 and enter. Let's use the dimension tool again, and this time we want the full length of the wall. Get the first point and then the second. Press Y, and this time we want this dimension above the first and also evenly spaced, so we can input 1000 here and press enter. This time the decimal value can be increased because this is displaying meters. So increase this to 3 in the View tab. Let's select the dimension tool again. This time we can get the full length of the building. Snap to the first point, then the second. Press Y, this time input 1500 and move this out beyond the last dimension. This will also need the decimal value increased to 3. I'm going to continue around and add in more dimensions around the drawing. Try work around and mark these in and also on the side. Adding dimensions along the vertical will be the same, just make sure and specify the x-axis whether positive or negative. When you do get those added, make sure and add the dimensions into the dimensions layer in the node tree. In this video, we take a look at how to add text in FreeCAD. Let's get started. To add text in FreeCAD, we can come back to the Draft Annotation toolbar. This first command here creates a text object. Let's actually create a new layer first. Rename this Text. Now make it the active layer and we can click to add a text object. We can click to place the text object in what will be the living room. This opens the properties, so let's add the text. Name this Living Room. In the View tab, you have some text properties if you need to adjust these. To use the label object, we can first select the first point, then the second as a leader line, and the third. The label text can be changed in the Data tab. Here in the label area, update the text between the square brackets. You don't need to remove the square brackets, just replace the text. This can read External Render. I'm going to add a few more text objects to indicate the different rooms. Try work around and add some text before the next video. In this video, we take a look at how to add a page template, how to insert the drawing into a drawing sheet, and how to export to PDF. Let's get started. There are different methods to display your drawing in FreeCAD. For this example, we will use a section plane. A section plane can be used to cut through a model and create elevations and sections. In our case, any object selected when creating the section plane will be visible within the layout. In the current version of FreeCAD, that involves expanding all the layers. In older versions, you only needed to select the group, but currently we will need to work down along and expand every group and layer. Then starting at the top, we can select layers. We don't need to include the construction folder. Press Shift and come right down to the bottom. Select the last object here. That's everything we want included in the layout selected. So with everything selected, we can come up to the arc menu and come down and select Section Plane. Here we can see a plane has been added and it's also listed in the tree view. Next, we need to switch workbenches. So from the workbench menu, we can switch into the TechDraw workbench. This workbench has some options for creating sheets. We can first use this option here and use a template to insert a page. So click this folder icon. This will open up into the FreeCAD templates folder that comes with the application. In here, we can choose a landscape ENM52 and open this up. That creates a new page, and you can toggle back and forth between the new page and the drawing below here. The information on the sheet can be updated by clicking on the green boxes and updating the field from the dialog box. I can cancel this. Now let's get our drawing displayed on this page. We can expand the page group first, as the new view will be added to the page group. Make sure the section is selected for this option here that inserts a view of a section plane from Arc Workbench. Click this and add the new view. Now this gets added very large and we will need to adjust its scale to fit the sheet. So first, select the Arc view and come down to the Data tab. We need to reduce the scale, so in here we can input 0.015. Then click away to update. This is not getting displayed correctly, so in the line width we can increase this to 0.5 or a value that displays correctly for your sheet. Click away to update. When you have the Arc view selected, it's possible to move and center up on the sheet. The name Arc view on the sheet can be changed by renaming the view in Tree View here. We can rename this Top View, for example, and that will update on the page. When you have the drawing sheet complete, you might want to print or export as a PDF. To export as a PDF, come to File and down and choose Export PDF. In my project folder, I can create a new folder. Rename this PDF. Double-click inside. Give the PDF a name. I can call this House Drawing. Now save the file. I can open this up off screen and drag this in. That's the drawing complete and very easy export from FreeCAD. In this video, we take a look at exporting the DXF file. Let's get started. When exporting from FreeCAD, we need to select all the objects we want to export. This has been a recent change and may change again in the future. Previously, only selecting the group was sufficient when exporting from FreeCAD. In the tree view, we can take a look at what we will be exporting first. The construction folder will not be exported. The dimensions won't be exported either. Let's select the dimensions group and press the spacebar to hide them. Close the layer. The text we can export and bring these into Blender. The section object we can select and press the spacebar to hide this. All the groups and layers are expanded from the dimensions lecture, so we can start below here. Shift select the last array object, then drag the slider and come to the very top. Now Shift select the first object. In the scene, everything that will be exported will get highlighted. Now we can come up to File and down and choose Export. In my project folder, I'm going to create a new folder. Rename this DXF. Double-click inside. We can call this House_Drawing. From the drop-down, there are many file types to export to, and we can look for and choose the DXF 2D format. Now click Save. That's it for FreeCAD. Well done for completing the drawings. Don't worry if you haven't, I'll make my file available when we get to the lecture of importing to Blender. If you have skipped the Blender section to complete this CAD section, then head back to the Blender Introduction series and continue from there. In those videos, we'll get set up in Blender. Then there will be a series of introduction videos so you can get a feel for the software. Included after these are some challenges to solve that should keep you on your toes.